Let's learn how we can make cinematic looks out of just ordinary clips. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to color grade our footage and also how to stabilize handheld shots, which are just videos you took with your hand, meaning that you didn't have a tripod, a gimbal, or anything that can help you get a stable shot. So let's go ahead and import some clips. So in your resource pack, we have 3 videos. We're going to be using all 3, just import them. And let's first look at how we can stabilize our footage, because that's the correct order. First, you want to trim your clip, maybe stitch 2 together, stabilize it, crop it, anything you want, and then you would proceed to color grade. Color grading should be one of the last steps that you have, because you want to have a base to work on. So let's go ahead and get a clip. This is a handheld clip. I'm going to fit this in, bring this to 3rd. And I'll cut this short, maybe about 4 seconds. I'll let it render. But basically, I took this shot using my hand, so you can see it's moving around. And you could just let it be. Sometimes you would want a stable shot to show that, to show a more cinematic look, but shaky footage like this could be an aesthetic for maybe vintage shots, film shots. So if you add like a film effect on it, it could actually work. So I'm going to just remove the first part, move this back, and this is the clip that we're going to be working with. Alright, so depending on what's in your clip, sometimes there's people, other times like this there's just a plant. So when we have a plant like this and we don't have a direct target, we can easily just use an effect from After Effects, which is called Warp Stabilizer, and that's just going to stabilize our footage. But other times, we have people in our video, and that is a clear target. So the target would be the person's head, and if it's moving around, we would just follow and track that person's head. So this is pretty easy. All you have to do is just go in Effects and Presets. If you're not seeing that, Window, Effects and Presets. Alright, now in Effects and Presets, go in the search bar and look for Warp Stabilizer. So under Distort, Warp Stabilizer. Click and drag it on top of your clip. It's going to do some analyzing, meaning that it's going to run your clip and it will try to stabilize it based on what After Effects thinks is your main target. So you can see that down here. You can see up here, it's currently at 2%. I'm going to let this run. You can see 4 minutes. I'm going to let this run and then we'll be back to see how well it did. Alright, so it finished stabilizing my clip, but you probably noticed that it kind of zoomed in. That is because there's an auto scale. You can see it zoomed in quite a lot, and therefore we're just seeing this leaf. And also, I did want to mention something, that when you add a warp stabilizer, it will add it to the entire clip. It doesn't matter if you cut the composition short. So if you want only 4 seconds of this video, make sure you will trim the video and then get rid of the rest. Let's look at the options up here. First, let's see what it did. Can hit space, you can see that it zoomed in, but it is a lot more stable than it was before. And the quality is low because we're on 3rd. This is what it looks like full, but it will be laggy. So if you saw your clip has bad quality, don't worry, it's because of this. Now the warp stabilizer did stabilize my clip, but I did end up losing most of my scene. I did lose half of my scene, so this may not be the best option if you have important things around your main subject. So come down to the auto scale. I'm going to open this up. You can see that you can set your own maximum scale. So when it auto scales, it will try to be below this guy. which right now is at 150. I can change this to 100 and it will maybe be 80 or 90%. Then if we go in advanced, we have some other things. And basically, this may work sometimes, it may not work in other times. You also have some results, smooth motion, no motion. Method, this is what we had, which kind of crops the video and is just trying to keep focus on the parts where there's less movement. So if you're moving your hand when you're filming, the movement would mostly be on the edges of your camera and the center would be stable. So it's going to focus on that stable part. Right, so I'm going to remove this warp stabilizer. See, we're back with the original clip. Another way to kind of make it stable is to maybe slow-mo the clip, which may not work that well, but if you want maybe a few seconds, it could work for you. So I'm going to get like 2 seconds of this clip, then right-click, time stretch. Instead of 100, we can go for like 70. And that is actually the wrong way. I'm gonna undo that and go back in here. So basically, because we're time stretching, we need to add a number greater than 100 and not less. So I'm gonna add a number greater than 100 and then come down here so it kind of loads. Now you can see it has slowed down my clip. And I'm just gonna close this off. So you can see it's slow, but it's not moving as much. Me hit Ctrl D to show a before and after. In the first one, I'm going to open up transform or just go in here, time stretch and turn it to 100, which is the original speed of your video. So this is the original clip. You can see it's moving a lot. The second one is a bit slower, but it's not moving as much. You can try this, it could work out for you. But I'm going to leave mine be with the slow-mo. I'm going to turn off the one that doesn't have the slow-mo. Right, let's look at another clip and see if the warp stabilizer can help us in different situations where we have a clear subject, but it's still not a person. So I'll turn the visibility off for this, and I'm going to bring in the old tower video. So now our subject is clearly the tower. You can perfectly identify it, whereas in the first video, it's a tree and the leaf is moving around because it's windy. So we didn't really have a clear subject that is always in frame. Let's bring this back. And when I play this footage back, you can see it's still shaking. But I can see to this point, it's less. Basically, whenever you have a clip, the first part and the last part is going to be the most shaky. And as you come in the middle and you stabilize your hand, it's going to be less shaky. So you can see it's less shaky. And compared to the first video, the motion in this is a lot less. So let's try the warp stabilizer. I will click and drag. Before I do that, because I only want 4 seconds, I'm going to cut this to 4 seconds. Add that in, and I'm going to open up auto scale. And from 150, I'm going to put it to 100. So it does not scale in that much. And again, I'm going to wait for this to do its thing. You can see that it's 101 frames. It will go through this frame by frame and try to minimize the motion that your video has. So it's a lot more quicker because I only got 4 seconds. And another way to, we'll get into that with the human subject. It's a lot easier. Another way to minimize motion in your videos is to use the tracker panel. And we'll get into that soon, which is usually gives an interesting result. We'll see that together. Now let's see what this video turned out, you can see that it's a lot more stable. The reason is that we have a subject in the distance, unlike the first video where half of our subject was out because it's a leaf and it was moving a lot on its own, even without our shaking hands. And basically, this video is still moving, but it's a lot more gentle, and therefore that creates a cinematic look. Because there are times when you don't have a tripod and you just gotta do it with your hands. So just try to have a stable position using your legs as support, and of course a camera strap. But if you want to go a step further, you can always get a gimbal, which is like a tripod, but it's a lot more handy. Once you attach your phone or your camera to it, it will film your subject without the movements included. So this is pretty good. Gonna bring this guy back and kind of create a sequence. Open this up. Place them like this. So this was the first result. Slow-mo worked better for this one. Second result, we used the warp stabilizer. Alright, our third video is of a person. And close these off for a second. Come into 2 arrow things. Go to project, because that's where our videos are. I'm just going to bring in our final video, which is of human subjects. So you can see it's zoomed in. I'm going to go back, or you can just go here and just scale it back to fit my frame. There we are. Change this to fit. Alright, now for this, let's look. Let it render. This is also a handheld shot, and you can see the subject is getting further away, and the person who is filming this is also walking at the same time. So the video is going to be moving up and down, and we could kind of minimize the effect of motion with the tracker panel. But again, because you're moving as you're taking this shot, it may not be that perfect. Alright, I'm gonna cut the rest. Control-Shift-D, Command-Shift-D, delete the second copy. Bring it around here, and let's see what we're working with. So you can see the person's walking as they're filming, and the subject is getting further away from the camera. I'm actually going to use the part where he's a bit further, because once we use the tracker and the subject is really close to the camera, that can be a bit tricky, because you would have to scale and position it. But if they are in a space where there is a lot of landscape around them, you can easily track it without having to lose any big parts of your footage. So I'm going to start from here. Remove the rest. The subject is moving further away from us, but we do have a lot of space around the subject. And I'm going to focus on this person, because they're in focus, and that will be easier. You can see the other person hides behind our subject, so this will not be a good target for the tracker panel. Alright. Let's bring this here. I'm going to close this. We don't need this anymore. And I'm going to get the tracker panel. You would have to get it, so go to Window, come down to Tracker. Then you can move it around if you want. You can bring it down here, over here, which is not a good spot. I'm going to drag it back to its original place. When you're video editing or animating, meaning that there's a lot of sequence, it's always a good idea to keep the longest part for the timeline and then keep anything, other panels on the side. That's what I like to do, at least. Right, selecting your video, you're going to go to Track Motion. motion source, make sure it's the video that you have. It's going to open up the layer on its own. You can see production ID. This is the video we have. And then we're going to set the current track. I'm going to select my video. And we're going to go to track motion. And then come down. I want to keep it on transform. Just keep it there. And we're going to get this tiny little box. Just zoom in to get the thing. I'm going to grab everything and just move it to the head of our subject. So any effects that we're doing is going to be on the person's head because that's the thing that we can focus on and the thing that is separate from the rest of the body. I'm going to zoom in and notice we have a cross in the center and then we have two boxes and that's track point 1. So this is your main target. This is where After Effects is going to focus on the most. And this little box just keeps it in place. The other box is where you're going to tell After Effects to look for this target. So if it's the head, there's going to be 1 point here, but the head is quite big. So we want to use the second box to tell After Effects that this is how big the head is. But if it was a tiny flower and like the flower petals ended here, you want to keep it small because you don't want to get it to focus on the background. So I'm going to bring this here and then just make this guy a little bigger. It's okay if you get a little bit of the sky. There's no problem. Alright, so now I have this box. I'm going to go in the beginning of my clip and do this from the start, not from the center, because it's going to track from the beginning. And here I can see that the head of my subject isn't really in frame. I'm going to move to the point where his head is in frame. Crop that. And then we're going to get the tracker and put it on the head. So make sure the target is always in frame. I'm going to go in a few frames and see if he moves out of my video. He does not. Alright, let's go from the beginning. Now that this is set, we are going to hit this analyze forward or this play button. And you can see that it's turning green. Basically, After Effects is going to track each frame and it's going to follow the motion of that target, which in our case is the head. So I'm going to let this run. It will take a while. It also depends on how long your clip is. But after this, we're going to see how we can enhance this property. Alright, so I let it do its thing and I also cut it so it's not that long. And now that we're done, we have to put all of these motion onto something else. And that's where a null object comes in handy. So go to Layer, New, come down to Null Object. Hit that, and then we're going to go into Tracker, select the video, go to Edit Target, make sure that it's on the null layer, hit OK, and then we're going to hit Apply. Make sure it's X and Y, hit OK, and once you come in here, you can see this red box just following around the head. And then we're going to get a camera layer. You can see if I go on the null object, these are all of the positions that the tracker panel chose for us. So then go to Layer, New, Camera Layer. Make sure you have all of these. 2-node camera, these guys should be the same. Name it if you want. Hit OK. It does not affect 2D layers. We have to turn these 3D later. Hit OK. And we're just going to use this spiral guy and put it on the null object, which is called the Pick Whip. I just like to call it this spiral thingy. And now we're going to make the null layer and the video layer into 3D layers. So right now you can see I don't have that option. Go to Toggle Switches / Modes. Now I do. just turn on this cube icon on null one and your video. Now it's going to work well because camera layers do not work on 2D layers, just like we saw. Now these two are 3D layers. So let's hit the spacebar, just let it load. Bring this resolution back to 3rd. I'm gonna let it load and notice how it moves out of frame. This just means that we need to do some scaling for this clip. Let's see that again. This is the product we have, but we need to fix the positioning. Alright, so I'm going to come to the point where it's most out of frame. And then I'm going to go on the video layer, hit P for position. And we're just going to position this guy. This is the X value. Just bring it to the center. We also need to scale it in a little bit. And then of course the Y. Want to go down and make sure it's in frame. Alright, and I'm going to go back. See that we still have that problem, so now I need to scale in my clip. So on that layer, also make sure you do not turn on the stopwatch, because that will be a keyframe. Hit S on the video layer to bring scale, and we're just going to zoom in our clip just enough so we don't get the person's head out of frame. Or if that is the case, just go back to P and move it down along the Y axis, or up in our case. Just like that. Let's see how it looks. And you can see that it's a lot more stable. Just in the beginning, it's a little bit confused. That's fine. Again, that's because the person who took this was moving up and down as well. But you can see after he stops walking, so here he's walking, and then here he's not, you can see that it's stable. Right. So I'm just going to cut it to the point where he stops walking. The person who took this video, that is. Right, so this is the point where he's just moving normally. Alright, hit M on that video layer. Now we have 3 clips that are edited and are ready for some color grading. Gonna go back. This was our first clip. Then we had our second clip. And finally we had our third clip. And in this lesson for 3 videos, we used 3 different ways to stabilize our shots using different methods. One of them was a really simple one, which is just slowing down your clip. We use slow motion for this guy, and you can see it's a lot more stable. We use an effect for this guy. It's pretty good. And finally, we use a tracker motion for this clip. So 3 different ways to edit your shots. I'm just gonna close my workspace at where the video stops. Alright. Now we're ready for some color grading. Alright, so what we're going to do is to create an adjustment layer. That's where we're going to put our color grading so that it's separate from the video, and if there was anything wrong, we could always maybe delete that layer or go back into properties and change it. The reason why we don't put it directly on the video is because we're trying to avoid future problems. Like if we added an effect to the video directly and we added like maybe 13, it's going to be hard to figure out which ones is which. And if you want to like lower the opacity of that effect, you'll end up reducing the opacity for the video itself. So when it's on a separate adjustment layer, you can reduce the opacity of all of the effects in that layer without affecting your video, because it's a separate layer. So click your timeline and we're going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Place that on top of everything. And just have a look at your clips and see if they have something in common. All of my clips, except for this guy, they were shot during the day. They're well lit. And as you can see, they're pretty bright, the first two clips. So that way, because they have similar lighting, I know that I can use a similar adjustment for both of these videos. But for the last one, after trying and seeing that it didn't work, I could add a separate adjustment layer for this. Alright, go from the beginning. We're going to bring back our effects and presets. Go to Window, Effects and Presets. I'm going to close the tracker panel. We don't need it anymore. And look for Lumetri Color. So this color correction effect is the basic one. It has all of these settings that you will need to start out. But if you want to add something special, then you would have to look for other options that we have. Click and drag Lumetri Color on top of adjustment layer. You saw that nothing happened because we didn't add any effects yet. So if you've edited photos before, these should be pretty familiar to you guys, like exposure, highlights, shadows, and basically anything that you need to change the lighting and the color of footage. So I'm going to go back from the start and I'm going to add some settings. You can add a custom LUT, which is just some, filters that you can add. You can make your own. You can browse it. You would download it online and then browse it here. I have some here already, and you can see once I click, it will change my video. And you don't have to use them. Sometimes they don't look that good. Like right now, I'm not happy with what I have. I'm going to set this to none, and I'm going to use my own input numbers. So let's look at the temperature. We said it was a sunny day, so that means we need to make it warmer. So make sure you do not turn on the stopwatch as always. We want these to be permanent for the entire clip. And it may take a while before you can see the preview of your effects. So just let it load. It may take some time, but it's worth it. I'm going to add some contrast to the clip. Darken the shadows. And we're going to increase the highlights. I can set this to maybe 5. I don't want that much. We're going to darken the blacks. Maybe increase the whites. And remember, the whites are usually parts of your colors as well, so be careful. It's not only the white things in the frame. Come down and I'm going to go in the saturation, and if you open this up, you have a slider too. I'm just going to reduce the saturation a little bit. It's a bit too intense. Right, and then come down to creative. We have some other options. Actually, I'll bring this back. Right. So you can make this a faded film. If I add this, it's going to kind of make the video flat. You can also not use this if you want. Faded film is also a vintage look, so if you have like nostalgic shots, you could add faded film to add to that effect. We also have some options for look, like we did with the LUT. Again, you would download these from online, but by default, you should have some options from Adobe. If I click this, you can see the thing, and you can always change the intensity. So I can make this less intense. There we are. And just go through them and look for something that I want, and I could combine this with what I already have. So I'm going to come back here, just reduce the colors a little bit, reduce the highlights, add to the shadows, add a little bit more contrast. I'm also going to remove the temperature. See, it's cold now. You can add a tint, change the white balance. Let's come down here, and I'm actually going to add like a pinkish tint to the leaves. You could add tints to the shadows. You can make it like cold if you want. We can always change and balance the colors as well. Let's go for a warm effect, and you can always double click to reset what you did. Alright, coming down to curves, this is the most helpful slider. You can always just skip these guys, the tone, you can reset it, and then you can just edit alone with the curves panel because it's just really helpful. And currently I only have this one look, so I'm going to see how it looks with the curves and decide whether or not I want to keep that look. Just gonna move this around and see which lighting is good for my footage. I'm gonna remove this, set it to none, so I have my original clip. And I could just work with these, move the sliders around to just set the shadows and the highlights. And like I said, I prefer using this guy rather than the tone. It's a lot more easier to use. And I usually get better results when I use this guy. Work with the midtones a bit, make them bright. Keep the shadows a bit darker. And this is my video. And if at some point you saw that your clip is maybe a little bit too green, too red, too blue, you can always go here and remove that by adding the opposite color. So the opposite color for green is magenta. And if you're moving it down, you're adding magenta. If you're going up, you're adding green. I'm gonna let this be. We also have some hue and saturation. Gonna come down here and see what I have. Some color wheels. And yeah. Gonna maybe make my clip a bit faded. Better yet, we could just go up here and add a negative for the contrast. Alright, so we did some stuff. We changed the lighting, added some vibrance, and I'm just going to close the curve panel. Just delete it. Close this and add a little bit more. Actually, the color is fine. So this was our clip before, and I turned off the visibility for adjustment layer 1. Turn it back on, you can see we added some things. The highlights are still a bit too high. Just gonna lower that. So again, before, after, so we made the clip pop by color grading. And I just did some basic stuff. Obviously, if you want to add maybe a tint to your thing, you can close the search bar, go down to color correction, and you have a lot more stuff that you can use. You can add a photo filter, a tint, some vibrance, and just anything that works for you. I'm gonna go to, let's add one for hue and saturation. So these will be separate. You can always close and see how much you have. You can reset them if you didn't like any of them. And you could add a tint to your overall look, maybe a purple tint or a blue tint. You can do that down below. Alright, so you can add a color range if you want. You can add some saturation to your clip. I am seeing that my clip became a little bit too yellow. I'm going to go back in here and actually it's good. Close that. We added some saturation. You can add a color range to that. So you can see it's completely changing the color, and you can see the wheel here. So you can go for maybe a colder tone, a warmer tone, or anything else that you want. I'm gonna leave my leaf be and see how this looks on my I guess beach video, and it looks fine. But if it wasn't, you can always just cut this and make another adjustment layer for the second clip. See how it looks on the third one, and it's looking good. So you saw that I didn't need to add a separate clip for a separate adjustment layer for this video. I am seeing that this video, the second one, is a bit zoomed in, kind of rotated because of the warp stabilizer. So I'm just going to scale this guy. Go on that layer, hit S, and just scale it in so you don't get those black spots once you're letting it stabilize. So now it's all in frame, and I'm pretty happy with how my thing looks. And also, this little box you see is not permanent. It's only for this guy. You can also cut both of these layers short if that is bothering you, but it's not something that will stick on your video once you export it. It's only there in After Effects. Alright, so we made some cool stabilizing effects. We added some color grading. Obviously, you can spend a lot of time and make things the way you want it. I'm going to Control-Shift-D on both these layers and just remove the extra bits. And I was thinking on the water shot, I want to make things a little bit more, I want to make the water a bit cyan. So I'm going to go in the beginning of the clip, layer, new adjustment layer, just bring it to where this guy starts and end it there too. Okay, now let's go to, I believe I saw it somewhere. Change color, apply to that. You can change to color. I'm going to go for, I guess, a cyan. Let's see. Go in the beginning. Hue transform. Actually, let's try something else. It's not a suitable thing. Gonna look for maybe vibrance. Add it on that. Gonna increase the vibrance for the water. It's a really nice blue color. I want to keep that, but I didn't want the vibrance to be increased for the other videos. That's why I made a separate thing. I'm gonna add a selective color, and I'll just delete this actually. So in the selective color, I'm going to go for the blues. Got a lot of blues here. You can add some cyan to those blues. You can see the color is changing. You can remove some of the yellows if you want. And let's add some magenta. So this is just changing the color of the blues that we have. This is the before, this is the after. It's mostly focusing on the sky. So I didn't quite catch this. I believe that's a bit green. Let's try cyan. I'm gonna check to see. Okay. So now we have the correct layer. Hit that to 0. And add some cyan to that thing. Reduce some of the magenta, make it a bit brighter. Just makes it look cool. I'm gonna go back to blues and just kind of darken it. Actually make it lighter. Just experimenting to see what works well for my preference. Give back some of the yellows. And alright. This was the before, it's the after. I just made things a bit more greenish with more cyan. And now we're done with our video. Gonna hit the space bar, let it render, and then we're gonna see the final clip that we made using stabilizers, different types, and some really easy and basic color correction that you could add to kind of enhance your videos. The names are pretty self-explanatory, but it's always helpful to bring one in if you think that the hue and saturation could help you. Just bring that in and test to see if that could make your clip better, or if you just prefer maybe vibrance. There's filters, there's levels, which is the lights and darks. There's the exposure, the curves that we saw was that diagonal line. There's tints. You can work with the shadow and the highlights. You can add a filter. And just all sorts of things that you could potentially use when you're editing and color grading your video. You can see it's under color correction, so this all relates to the colors of your clip. So that was how you color grade and stabilize videos in After Effects. These all relate to cinematic looks. If you're trying to edit videos more professionally, you should definitely go for good color correction. If you don't know where to start, you can always just download some online and then learn as you proceed to use those guides. You make your own custom ones and see what works for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. I will see you guys in the next one.